Okay, let's get started. It is with great honor and delight that I get to introduce Huriya Erin Kimmitt, Erin Farha Kimmitt. I have known Erin her entire life. She's a wife married to Father Joseph Kimmitt, pastor at St. George in Norwood, Massachusetts. She's the mother of two great young men. She's a master iconographer and a graphic designer. Erin chants and sings in the choir. She's a baker, a fabulous cook, a great friend. When I need counsel and direction, I look to Erin to set my path straight. Or if I need a listening ear, a friend, or a good laugh, I call Erin. She has dedicated her entire adult life to service. First and foremost, serving her Lord. Her gifts are great in number, all nourishing our senses. Her cookbook, Hospitality and Joy, is a feast, not only satisfying the senses of taste and smell, but the book itself is a feast for the eyes. Check it out if you haven't already done so. Many churches around the country are now adorned with iconography written by the hand and heart of Erin. Also in the church, she weaves her knowledge of theology into her iconography and the hymnography of the church, like a glistening golden thread, tying everything together in its intended beauty. I know that you will enjoy Erin's perspective and deep but accessible spirituality. Today's presentation is entitled, God is with us in image and song. I give you Erin Kimmitt.
Okay, so 100% I cannot follow that description. So God bless you, Chris. I could say all of those things and more about you. You know I love you, and you are my mentor in every facet of my life. So anyway, we will do our best to live up to that description a little tiny bit with God's help. So I want to start by saying thank you to everyone for your willingness to spend the afternoon with me. I apologize in advance because I'm like working from notes and Zoom, and anyway, it's much nicer to be in a group with people and, you know, kind of walk away from the notes, but I'm going to kind of stick to them. So I apologize when I look right past you onto my notes. I want to say when Chris first reached out to me and asked me to give a talk for SMI, I was super excited. So she and I have had the joy of collaborating on a few SMI talks over the years, and I've loved every minute. I mean, who doesn't want to spend countless hours with Chris Farha, the amazing Chris Farha? So I knew that if I was going to get to spend a little time with her, while at the same time talking about my favorite subject, then life wouldn't be any better. So clearly when she called, I was pretty much a yes. Then she told me this year's topic was the Feast of the Nativity, and that sealed the deal. The Nativity icon is one of my all-time favorites. It's a beautiful and perfect illustration of the Gospels we preach, the hymns we sing, and the stories we tell. So with God's help, I will try to help you see with your eyes what you hear with your ears. Okay. As an iconographer, that is one who paints icons, and an iconologist, or someone who studies the meaning of icons, the Nativity icon is a super fun icon to discuss. Not only is it a visual treasure packed with symbolism and imagery, a literal feast for the eyes, but I believe that the very subject itself, the theology of the birth of Christ and the incarnation or coming in the flesh, one could argue is a sort of birth for iconography. Yes, I realize that this is not a session in defense of icons, so I don't want to go too far down this road. But since we're covering the Nativity, a subject that is referenced again and again in defense of icons, I can't help but touch on it a little. So, to my point, let me offer this quote excerpted from St. John of Damascus's writings on the divine image. In former times, God, being without form or body, could in no way be represented. But today, since God has appeared in the flesh and lived among men, I can represent what is visible in God. Here's another. Therefore, I boldly draw an image of the invisible God, not as invisible, but as having become visible for our sakes by partaking of flesh and blood. I'm pretty sure my feeble attempts at clarifying will only muddy the waters made so clear by St. John. But here goes. The invisible, indescribable God has come in the flesh, so we can now represent what is visible. What more need we say? And so with these two amazing and affirming quotes as the framework around which we will build our conversation on iconography, let's get started. Hey, wait, as fun as it sounds, most of us don't actually start a meal with dessert. Neither do we build a house from the roof down. So as much as I'd love to dive right into dessert, or in our case, the theology of the nativity icon, which trust me, will be way more fun than dessert, I think we should back up a little bit and start by building a good foundation. Yes, I know I'm mixing my metaphors, but I think you get the point. Hey, did you notice even my little cake squares are built on a firm foundation of 3, I might add. All right, here we go. So let's back up about 2,000 years and take a look at the church's teaching on the first icons. The first icon was not made by hands, as that of the Holy Napkin. You may be familiar with the story of Abgar, ruler of Edessa, who suffered from leprosy. He sent a messenger, Ananias, to Christ to ask for his healing and also in order to bring back a depiction of Christ. However, Ananias, unable to capture Christ's likeness himself, instead returns to Abgar with the Holy Napkin, an icon which Christ himself made by washing his holy face and drying it with a cloth. Upon joyfully receiving the cloth and reverencing it, Abgar was healed of his leprosy, all except for a little tiny spot on his forehead, which was only healed after his baptism. According to church tradition, the first icon made by hands is said to have been painted by St. Luke. Depicted in this icon, you see the evangelist himself painting an icon of the Virgin and Christ child. The presence of the angelic figure whose hands appear to trace the same path as the saints tell us that St. Luke's hands and his heart are being guided by divine inspiration. The church offers us these traditions that Christ and St. Luke made the first icons in order to show us its unwavering blessing on the use of icons in our prayer and in our worship. Okay, so how are we doing? It's a little bit of history, I know. Let's move on. We'll get a little bit further down the road. So with a little of the history under our belts, and therefore a little understanding of the why and the how, let's look at the what. What is the purpose of icons? What do they do? As with everything I've mentioned so far, we could write a book on this topic, but there's no time for that, so I suppose we'll save the lecture for another day. For now, let's cover a few things that will come in handy as we continue to build our foundation and prepare ourselves for the dessert. Imagine life without printing presses or the internet. No photos, books, or postcards. Not even Zoom. Okay, these days, that would be impossible. How would we learn? Where would we get our information? Imagine how precious an icon would be to the church, to your life. Not only would it inform you and teach you about Christ in a literal sense, but it would offer you the teachings of the church in less literal ways and give you a platform through which you would enter into a heavenly space in prayer. Whether from the Gospels, church hymnography, or holy tradition, icons relate to us in image what is written in word. Oh, just wait till we get to the icon of the Nativity and you will really see that play out beautifully. But first, this icon of the myrrh-bearing women is a wonderful example of storytelling. It depicts a gospel account that we're all familiar with. The myrrh-bearing women who come to the tomb bearing spices to anoint the body of Christ, but instead find an empty tomb and are greeted with an angelic figure robed in white. There is much to be learned from this icon if we delve deeper, but suffice it to say that we easily recognize the familiar story simply by looking upon the painted image. And I'm guessing with a bunch of musicians in the room, you all can hear the hymns running through your mind as you look. I have a little homework suggestion for you, since again, we can't do all of this today. There are several gospel accounts of this story. Additionally, it is peppered throughout our rich hymnography. So you got a lot to choose from. So of course, as is fitting, there are many types of this icon. A type being like various ways in which it is depicted. Sometimes there are many women, sometimes there are only a few, often one angel, sometimes two. Occasionally you'll find the sleeping soldiers as well. Keep your eyes peeled and your ears open and take note of the variety of accountings in both word and image. See if you can match up which gospel or hymn you are looking at. That's a good challenge. Let me know what you find out. Okay. Icons also teach us theological truths. Sometimes those truths which the church gives us are not a simple snapshot in time. In the icon of Pentecost, we see most of what we know from the biblical account. The apostles are gathered, seated in a house, when tongues as of fire sat upon each of their heads. However, look a little closer at the icon, and what do you see? St. Paul is there, right at the top next to St. Peter. But we know that Paul was not yet on the scene, so to speak, at the first Pentecost. Chronologically, he comes along later. But the church in her wisdom gives us this icon with Saints Peter and Paul seated side by side. The message is that together they are the pillars of the church. The theological truth is what's important here. It is not a snapshot in time, but a snapshot of what we believe. Okay, so there's no way I can move on and let us walk away without having at least touched for a second on what I believe is perhaps the most important thing that icons do. Icons are created in prayer for the purpose of prayer, for my prayer and for your prayer. Yes, they teach us. Of course, they inspire us. But above all else, they help us to know God and to build a relationship with Him. That is my prayer with each and every brushstroke I make, that those who pray before the icon I am painting will come to know God more fully and draw ever nearer to Him. Just a little sweet note about this icon before we move on. This is St. John of Damascus, whose writings we quoted at the beginning of his talk, and whose hand had been cut off for his writings in defense of the veneration of holy icons. He is depicted here kneeling in prayer before an icon of the Mother of God, beseeching her for the restoration of his hand so that he could continue to write and defend the faith. What a beautiful illustration of everything we've discussed thus far, all in one icon: storytelling, theology, church tradition, prayer, and relationship with God. And for the record, his prayer was answered and his hand was restored, all but a red line left to show where his hand had been cut off. If we have time at the end, somebody remind me and I'll tell you about the story of the icon which depicts that miracle. Okay. We are once again at a crossroad where we have to decide, do we spend countless hours just on the topic of tradition, or do we hit the high points and then forge ahead with the nativity icon as our goal? Conveniently, I've already anticipated your answers, and so we're moving ahead, taking just a few minutes to glance at icons through the ages and reflect on how tradition and prayer have guided and informed their creation for the past 2,000 years. Oh wait, I forgot to tell you what is important about tradition. I know I'm probably overstating this, and I'm sure a few of my iconographer friends might disagree with my characterization, but I really do compare painting icons with translating the Bible. I don't think it's the iconographer's job to come up with some new and clever way to tell a story. I definitely don't think it's my job to decide that the Virgin Mary would look stunning in hunter green. Just as our bishops and our priests look to the Holy Fathers, and our scholars refer back to the original text for their translations, so do iconographers look at the icons of the past, to holy tradition, to divinely inspired images that have survived the ages. Of course, we always allow for the work of the Holy Spirit to guide our every decision, but we start first with tradition as our guide. Speaking of tradition, first you see here a very early and exquisite icon of Christ from the 6th century. My dear friend Warren Farha first introduced me to this icon nearly 30 years ago, and it's been a favorite ever since. I highly recommend a book written by Father Maximos Constas called The Art of Seeing if you want to explore the power and beauty of this treasure of the Church, which exists even to this day. Now, look at an icon from the 20th century. While created some 1,300 years apart, look how truly similar they are. Note the clothing, the halo, the facial features, the hair, the blessing hand. I could go on, but truly they're remarkably similar. One being a very early type and the other clearly inspired by that type. Now again, the same could be said for this pair of icons of the Theotokos. This one from the 12th century and another from the 20th century. Again, it's almost impossible to miss the thread of tradition which runs through these examples. Icons are not created by chance or whim. Instead, they are both art and theology, painted with a special language whereby most everything holds meaning. Composition, perspective, gesture, and posture, to name a few. As we delve into the icon of the Feast of the Nativity, we will have an opportunity to discuss many of these elements. But first, a quick overview of a few familiar icons would be helpful. Many of you may have already heard the theology of color as it relates to icons of Christ and the Theotokos. But for the sake of those who haven't, here's a quick overview. Christ wears a purple or red tunic closest to his body, a color associated with royalty or divinity, over which he is draped in a cloak of blue, a color often associated with humanity. The placement of colors expresses the theology. He is the divine God who put on flesh for our sakes. Alternatively, the Virgin wears a blue tunic closest to her skin, though she is draped with a robe of red or purple. This reminds us that she put on royalty when she consented to bear the Christ. Another fun detail with regard to the Virgin is that she has 3 stars, one on her forehead and 2 on her shoulders. Well, sometimes one of the shoulders is covered with Christ, but it is implied and shown when possible. In any case, these 3 stars are symbolic of her virginity, before, during, and after the birth of Christ. You'll want to hang on to that detail for our next segment. Christ also holds a scroll, a symbol of his wisdom. He is God even as a child, hence the scroll, which helps to affirm that belief. You also see a cross in the halo of Christ, both as child and as Pantocrator, which bears the letters O'Am, which roughly translate to I am, and are a reference to the Old Testament encounter of Moses at the burning bush. I know I keep saying it, but there are just like so many things that we could talk about, but in the interest of time and the goal at hand, we're going to move forward. Okay. Hey, did you think we'd ever get here? We're here. It's time to talk about the nativity icon. Okay, I want you to listen carefully as I read these words. Of course, I think you've already been singing them. What shall we offer thee, O Christ, who for our sake has appeared on earth as man? Every creature made by thee offers thee thanks. The angels offer a hymn, the heavens a star, the wise men gifts, the shepherds their wonder, the earth offers a cave, the wilderness a manger, and we offer thee a virgin mother. These inspired words tell us an unforgettable and amazing story. It's just a few words, really, so simple and yet so profound. They are poetry and theology. They open our hearts and our minds, and they fill us with awe. Now, hear the words of this hymn again. What shall we offer thee, O Christ, who for our sake has appeared on earth as man? Every creature made by thee offers thee thanks. The angels offer a hymn, the heavens a star, the wise men gifts, the shepherds their wonder, the earth offers a cave, the wilderness a manger, and we offer thee a virgin mother. The icon and the hymn are one and the same. We hear the words and we see the image. They work together as if parts of a choir, telling the story and proclaiming the truth that God is with us. I truly don't know what I can say after reading that hymn that would even begin to be as profound or as inspiring or as enlightening as the hymn itself. My words pale in comparison, and yet here we are. So, in the spirit of the hymn, which is an accounting of the many ways in which creation offers itself to our Lord, I ask for your prayers as I offer my thoughts about this festal icon. With the hope and understanding that icons are steeped in tradition and painted in prayer with the guidance and inspiration of the Holy Spirit, it should be quite clear by now that the icon is not at all about the iconographer, not about his whims as to subject matter or color choices. It's about telling the story that's already been told, about honoring holy tradition, about seeking the will of God and working always for his glory, and only then letting the icon unfold before you. So here we go with this beautiful icon. We see here many examples of icons, old and new, painted in tradition. They are in many ways the same as we've come to expect with our brief understanding of tradition. And yet there are differences which we can ascribe to the work of the Holy Spirit as well as the hand and heart of the iconographer. The story told is a compilation of that which we hear in the Gospels and that which we hear in the hymns and readings of the Orthodox Church. And then, just when you thought it was really that simple, there are intricacies that are neither in the hymns nor the Gospels, but are divinely inspired details that further reveal that which we, the Church, hold to be true. Let's take a look. I like to start by talking a bit about composition. Composition is not tangible per se. It is not an object, in that it is not a series of objects that provide a storyline. It is rather an unspoken framework by which we view an icon. It provides harmony and clarity of thought and movement. This particular icon of the Nativity clearly demonstrates the use of composition as a way of shaping our understanding and directing our attention through the story. First and foremost, one can see a strong diagonal movement in this icon. If we draw an X from corner to corner, we see quickly that the center of the X directs you to the central theme of the story, the Christ child lying in a manger next to the Virgin Mary. There is also quite a strong vertical movement in the composition, which serves to bring us right back to the center of the X. Notice how the sides of the mountain direct our gaze upward in an upside down sort of V to the mandorla. That's the semicircle at the top of the icon, which represents the presence of God and the heavenly realm. And from that heavenly mandorla descends a beam of light, which carries the star to rest over Christ's tiny head, like a sort of exclamation point. This unique treatment of the star tells us that this is no ordinary star in the sky, but rather a messenger from heaven. Another technique of composition, which is less about directional movement through a storyline and more about articulating a sort of hierarchy of importance, is clearly employed in this icon. Within the central scene of the cave, we see Christ lying in the manger, which sits a little higher than the Virgin. Similarly, the righteous Joseph is typically shown on a lower horizontal plane than either Christ or the Virgin. He is a saint of the church, and his presence indicates that he is part of the nativity story. In fact, the church recognizes him on the Sunday following this feast. But his absence from the centralmost scene makes clear what we already know from Scripture. This was a virgin birth. Therefore, Joseph would have no role in that particular narrative. Other figures, whether high or low, big or small, are set all around the outskirts of the main scene and complete the story for us without overshadowing the central theme. While we're on the subject of the other figures and their placement around the icon, it seems the perfect time to talk about another technique used in iconography. That is the use of multiple scenes and the repetition of figures in one single scene. Note that in this particular icon, the Virgin Mary and Christ child appear twice. The first time at the prominent center of the X, which we've already discussed, and the second time in the lower right corner, enthroned and receiving the Magi who come bearing gifts, and who also appear in the icon twice. Do you see them at left on horseback? It may strike one as odd the first time you notice this technique with multiple people happening multiple times. Perhaps you're wondering if there were two sets of Magi and you just don't remember that part of the story. But once you really start to look at icons, you notice that this is kind of common. And just as our earthly concept of time and place disappear in worship, so too the chronological, linear timelines collapse in icons as multiple scenes present for us the fullness of a story in just a single composition. I know I say this a lot, but 1,000 things could be said about this particular subject. Specifically how gestures and objects and draping offer so much to a narrative and the way in which we speak and the story unfolds for the viewer. But short is time, so let me point to a way in which this technique is employed that is so subtle and yet so powerful. Not always, but fairly often, you will see in icons of the Nativity that the Virgin is looking not at her newborn, but instead at the righteous Joseph. One might logically think she'd be gazing at her son at a time such as this, wouldn't we? But Joseph, depicted here in a contemplative and troubled state, represents us and our human struggles with doubt. Thus Mary, in her compassion, lovingly casts her gaze upon him and us as our fervent intercessor. We'll talk more about Mary in a moment, but first, a little more about gesture. A few noteworthy gestures are those of the angels. At left, you see a cluster of angels looking down from heaven, their hands covered in reverence and humility as they glorify the incarnate God. On the right, you see another angel holding his staff, his right hand raised in a gesture of blessing as he brings the message of good news to the shepherds. That gesture is the same one our priests bless us with, and the same one used in the icon of Christ Pantocrator shown below. Can you see how the hands form the Greek letters that we spoke of, Isus Christos, for Jesus Christ? Technical difficulties. Oh. Okay. Another super interesting tidbit about posture and what it implies is the topic of this next slide. In the case of the Virgin's posture, whether reclining or sitting, it has changed over the centuries according to the needs of the people and in order to squash blossoming heresies. In the close-up at left, we see that she is shown in a traditional reclining posture. At right, she is shown fully sitting upright. When there arose a controversy regarding the virgin birth and whether her reclining posture in icons implied something other than that, in order to eliminate any confusion, iconographers changed Mary's posture to a seated position to suggest that indeed it was a virgin birth and that in fact she did bring forth the Holy One without labors. Ultimately, the Church accepts both postures as appropriate, each offering their own message for our edification. You might recall now that little tidbit I shared about the 3 stars. While this icon is probably too small for you to see, the 3 stars are there, echoing that concept of her being ever virgin. Unrelated to posture, but hey, as long as we're on the subject of heresies, here's another one. Another issue that cropped up actually in order to kind of try to avoid a heresy, happened in the 18th century. The midwives shown washing the Christ child in each of these icons are neither in biblical accounts or the hymnography of the Church. However, they are mentioned in the apocryphal Gospels. Our Church relies heavily on Holy Tradition, and hence the midwives were depicted without question in icons for centuries. It was not until so that even as early as the 6th or 7th century, you will find the midwives in the icons. It was not controversial then, or at any ecumenical council, or even during the iconoclastic era. However, a few hundred years ago, it became an issue on Mount Athos, and thus they began whitewashing that particular scene out of icons so as to avoid confusing the faithful by implying that Christ needed washing. This speaks once again to the virgin birth. However well-intentioned their points, and there were many, too many for us to discuss here, the Church ultimately calmed these concerns and pointed out that in this case, Christ condescended to a human custom, just as he did with baptism and just as he did with circumcision, none of which he needed. Thus, the midwives remain as an appropriate theme in nativity icons to this day, without fear that their presence offers any statement regarding the virgin birth. So, selfishly, I wanted to include one more stunning quote from St. John of Damascus, but I didn't want to overwhelm you and overload you, but it's just so beautiful. So here it is, especially the last piece of it, which I think fits so nicely with the Church's answer on the midwives about Christ condescending to human customs. So here goes. If it is reasonable that we are led to the understanding of divine and immaterial things by using material things, and if God in his providence and love for mankind clothes in form and image what is without form or image for our sake, what is wrong with making perceptible images of him who in his love for mankind stooped down to assume our form and shape? So lovely. Okay, I'd like to speak a little bit about Christ and the way that he is depicted. As we know from the Gospel of Luke, he is wrapped in swaddling clothes and is placed in a manger. Incredibly, he is by far the smallest figure in the icon, and yet our eye goes right to him. We discussed that composition plays a tremendous part in directing our eye. However, the dramatic use of color also plays a huge role here, directing our attention to this tiny but powerful figure. The Christ child, clothed in white, stands in stark contrast against the blackness of the cave. Not only does this color contrast point to his importance, but also it is noteworthy that he is placed directly in front of the cave opening, standing, if you will, between us and the cave. The message for us is so clear. He is the light in our darkness. He stands between us and death. Speaking of death, another detail which is easy to miss is that Christ's swaddling clothes are actually grave wrappings, and his manger is painted as a tomb. Look at the image of the resurrection, where we see the grave wrappings and the empty tomb. Once again, the message is quite clear. These subtle images foreshadow for us the teachings of the church. Christ was born to die for us and for our salvation. Okay, here we are nearing the end of our time together, and there's still so much to say. So I'm going to just work through as many more details as we have time. So here we go. There's the Jesse tree, which sprouts up directly below Christ and the Virgin in the icon. This is an Old Testament prophecy from Isaiah, which reads, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him." And how can we walk away without mentioning the ox and the ass? No matter how simple or how detailed a nativity icon might be, the ox and the ass are never left out, despite their lack of mention in the Gospels. And they're not just somewhere in the picture, they are front and center. Do they too bring their offering? Perhaps the warmth of their breath. From the earliest of nativity icons, the ox and ass are present. There are many deeply historical and theological points that could be made here, most of which I'm not trained enough to understand or explain. So let us rather let the prophet Isaiah do the heavy lifting and explain with his own God-inspired words. "The ox knows its owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider." I know we spoke a bit about the Magi, but I wanted to comment just a little bit more. Yes, we pointed out that they are shown twice in the icon, once at a distance as they travel from afar on horseback, and the second with a posture of humility presenting their gifts. You may not see it in this small image, but it is interesting to note that they are of varying ages. Their hair color and beards, or lack thereof, are the telltale signs. We might have assumed that they would all be older, indicating maturity and wisdom. However, these learned men are depicted both young and old, which tells us that the church believes wisdom can come at any age. Okay, now a little bit about the guy in the fur coat who always gets so much attention. And now I'm about to do the same. Okay. You will find much written about him, and often it is said that he represents the devil and that he is tempting Joseph to question the virgin birth. Occasionally, you will find someone who says, nope, he's just a shepherd, and perhaps is no different than a friend or acquaintance who also might lead us to sin and to fall into doubt. I'm not here to tell you which answer is more accurate, and I'm sure it doesn't matter in this case. Up until a few years ago, I was sure he was the devil. Then I attended a conference at the Museum of Russian Icons in Clinton, Massachusetts. Let me give you a plug for them if you're ever in the area. It's a beautiful place. Anyway, one of the presenters is an expert on the devil. Yuck. Like, imagine putting that on your resume. Anyway, he gave a talk about the devil in iconography and the telltale markings. I, of course, too afraid to ask a question in the middle of the session, ran right up to him at the end of the session and asked why he didn't mention the devil in the icon of the Nativity. He insisted that's because he is not the devil, that he has none of the traditional markings which would indicate that he is. So I'm left with a quandary because I'm always asked about him and I never know what to say. So this is what I think. Either way, the message is really the same. The devil puts in our path struggles which either cause us to fall or cause us to reach out to God and rise above the struggle. Maybe this hymn from Vespers of the Forefeast of the Nativity will show us exactly the teachings of the Church on this event. Joseph, when he beheld the greatness of this wonder, thought that he saw a mortal wrapped as a babe in swaddling clothes. But from all that came to pass, he understood that it was the true God who grants the world great mercy. As I was doing a dry run of this presentation for my friend Michelle, she asked, "Who is the little guy with the flute?" Crazy. I felt I had covered everyone, and that this little guy had never even crossed my mind really blew my mind. I had written nothing about him. In my mind, I guess I just lumped him with the shepherds. Funny how you can look at something 1,000 times and miss a detail such as that until the right person at the right time calls attention to it. So I did a little homework, and here is what I found. He is a shepherd playing a flute. Let's ponder that for a minute. In all my sources, nothing much was said, except perhaps he was joyfully welcoming the good news with music. Indeed. So I think he is my finale. How providential that the musical shepherd is brought to my attention as I'm writing for a bunch of musicians. Of course, he is joyfully welcoming the good news with music. This is SMI. We raise up our God-given voices in song and declare the wonders of our faith. What shall we offer thee, O Christ? Okay, I would be happy to take your question. Do we have any questions, Chris?
I am setting myself up for this. Yes.
All right. I think we have like a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Good.
We're doing very well on time.
Ask her about the color. What about the color?
Okay.
Cody, can I ask a question?
Ask
Why
away.
Okay, maybe I missed it, but you know, like the colors are gold and you know, you see that a lot in icons, but in this one they're more like brown and drab. Is that to create a contrast, or is that just like the colors they usually have in iconography of the earth and the mountains?
In the particular one you see now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it could be the actual icon, the whole background is fully gold leafed and the mountain is almost a golden color as well. So I think it's probably more gold than it's coming off in the in your, you know, as you guys in the presentation. Yes, exactly. Because you're right, gold and light are definitely a part of it. Different palettes, you know, can vary from one iconographer to another. So sometimes kind of everything is more of muted colors that you know, none of them are bold, knock you out kind of colors. And then in other palettes, you'll see more of like jewel tones. So I think that some of that it depends on the iconographer and their palette. But in this case, I think it's quite gold and light. It's probably just not translating too well.
Yeah. Are there, sorry, one more question, Sarah. Are there general, like you said, you know, the idea, like there's certain figures that historically are used in nativity icons, say, you know, and like the 3 stars on the Mother of God in general and so on. But like, who created the templates? Like, why, you know, like how much liberality do iconographers have, I guess, in general, not just with this one?
So I think that is a many-faceted question, which is excellent. What I would say is it all had to start somewhere, right? So we read about the earliest icons from St. Luke and the Holy Napkin, and then, you know, we imagine that it started small, and then little by little, as people, artists / theologians were divinely inspired, more icons came onto the scene. I think what happens, even you can see in the last couple hundred years, new icons will come along, and then maybe better icons will replace, you know, because obviously you have like a newer saint and there wasn't an old icon. And you'll kind of see that the church hangs on to some and others kind of fade away. So I think, you know, with the help of the Holy Spirit and tradition, certain icons, you know, stand and become, you know, models for iconographers to continue that. You know, it's not like there's like I mean, there are definitely pattern books and rule books and, you know, all that kind of stuff, but I think it's more of a kind of more unspoken. And, you know, I might look at 30 or 40 icons of the Hospitality of Abraham before I ever kind of hone in on one that I'm about to paint. You know what I mean? So I think it's to each iconographer sort of.
Right. Thank you very much. It was very, very, very good today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank God.
Aaron?
Yes.
Benjamin said, putting off the old man and putting on the new with regard to Joseph and the old man, that would make sense next to the scene of Christ's baptism.
Oh, yes.
Good comment. Beautiful.
Excellent comment.
Mm-hmm,
Yes.
mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
And Aaron, your website is apicons.com?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Someone asked. I'll put it in the chat,
yeah,
everyone.
It is. It's not very, I don't, you know, it's not very up to date, but yes, that's it.
Okay, so that's your website. And are the cookbooks also available on your website? It's a question. Someone asked.
Yes, they
Okay.
should be, and they're, yes, they should
Great.
be. And they're definitely available on hospitalityandjoy.com.
Okay, I'll put that
Or
too.
at 8 Day Books, just saying. So, did you like how I got the food picture in? I always mix my subjects, you know.
You know I loved that. Okay, do I spell out and?
Yes.
Hospitalityandjoy.com?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, you know one thing I didn't talk about that, oh my gosh, there's a million things I didn't talk about. But one thing is, you know, I talked about how Christ is like the smallest little figure. And at the same time, the Virgin is the largest figure. And there they are right next to each other. And those kinds of liberties are taken in icons to, you know, to call attention and to, you know, tell the story in a little kindergartner kind of way. You know what I mean? Like if you think about a child, it would, you know, we have all this stuff in our head. We already know the stories and we're trying to make sense of it all. But if you just looked at it from really simple eyes, those things are very telling. Something else I thought was amazing that I read when I was, you know, kind of doing some research was that, you know, Christ and the Virgin are right in the center, and all around them, like, is everything. Like we have the angels, we have the mandorla, so we have the heavenly realm, we have the shepherds, like the you know, we have the educated guys over here. We have the the magi, and we have the simple shepherds, and then we have Joseph, and it's just all of creation is right there, just as the hymn says, and it's just all right there, So I wish I could hear you all sing. I'll have to.
We do too.
Have to listen.
What is the oldest icon still existing?
Well, everybody's got a different answer to that.
Okay.
So the icon of Christ the Pantocrator that I showed from the 6th century at St. Catherine's, Mount Sinai, is still existing from what I understand, and it's 6th century. It's quite old. Some people will tell you emphatically that absolutely the icons of St. Luke do not exist, and other people will say, I've been at the monastery and I saw them. So I would say that would trump everything if they are in existence. I have a couple of nun friends who both insist they've been in the back room and seen them. So, but everybody's got their opinion on that. So anyway.
And Joseph posted an article that you can read on the shepherd boy playing the flute.
Oh, yay, nice.
Okay. If anyone else has a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. And then when you're done, kindly mute yourself again.
Erin?
Yes?
It's Valerie. You were going to tell us something else about St. John of Damascus.
Oh, yes. I was going to tell you, okay, you probably can't see it. Hold on one second. Conveniently located on
We're not going anywhere.
this icon. You guys see that?
Yes.
So this is the icon of 3 hands. And if you look down here, you see that hand?
Yes.
So this is, my understanding, an obviously reproduction of the actual icon of the Virgin Mary that St. John of Damascus prayed in front of and was healed by. And then in Thanksgiving, the story goes that he had this hand created and added to the Riza cover. See this gold cover that was already on the icon? He had this silver hand made and added to it. And so this is called the icon of the Virgin of the 3 hands. So confusingly, there is also an icon out there that has, it kind of looks like this, but it doesn't have the Riza cover. It's just a painted icon. But it has the Virgin Mary has 3 hands. But that is not the story. So I've tried, like, I drive them crazy when I go to the Clinton Museum, because I want those answers, and I want to talk about it because they have several icons that have the Virgin Mary with 3 actual hands awkwardly placed. They're all hers. And I recently, when I was, studying up a little bit, I recently read where it said, that's incorrect. I'm like, not one, I don't like to say wrong because there's different traditions and I don't want to smack anybody. But the writings that I read about said that was confused. This is the story and this is the icon of St. John of Damascus and the Virgin with the 3 hands. So there you go.
Benjamin asks, how do you prepare to write an icon? We have 2 minutes until Vespers.
Okay, so
Right.
This is a great question, and I'm going to tell you what I was told, because when I was very first learning, I was just like a nervous Nelly about everything, and I was always afraid I was going to be told, oh, P.S., you actually aren't eligible. You know what I mean? So I was terrified all the time that the other shoe was going to drop and I was going to find out that I'm not allowed to do this, or that there's like rules I can't figure out or something. And I had friends who had been taught, and they were always, they would say to me, so what's your prayer rule with, relating to iconography or whatever? And I'd say, I didn't give me a prayer rule. Like, you just, so one day I specifically asked the person who trained me, like, where's my prayer rule? What's the prayer rule? And he said, You live your life like an Orthodox Christian on your path to salvation. That's what you do. If the services are offered, you take them. If the fast is offered, you take it. Like, you live every moment like you're supposed to live as an Orthodox Christian, and that's how you prepare yourself. So I apply that to myself as a clergy wife, and I apply that to myself as an iconographer, because I don't know what other rules are. I'm very rules oriented, and I would try to follow them all. But for me, I think that's the best answer that I have, is just try to live like the best I can and offer it to God. And I feel like, and I always tell my students this, if I do everything in my power to ask God to help me, and I live a life the best I can, failing as it is, to ask him to help me, he will make up for what I lack. If I am like willy-nilly about it and I just go, well, he's going to take care of it anyway, I don't think he has any reason to help me. So that's my theory. Live my life the best I can, ask for help, and know that he will make up for what I lack for your sake, for the people who need the icons, not because I deserve it, but because the people praying before the icons deserve it. So that's kind of my theory. We'll see if God agrees.
God bless you, Erin. Thank you so much for everything that you poured into this most beautiful presentation. The chat is full of accolades, full of thanksgiving, full of expressions of gratitude. We can't thank you enough. God bless you, God bless you, God bless you. Shall we all gather and go to Vespers?
Yes, it was a treat for me. God bless you all. Thank you for letting me talk.
I love you.
The leader from Worcester, but that was Father Ephraim's wife.
Now I can say, hi, Patty.
Nice job, Chris. Beautiful job. You're a good leader.
Chris is a rock star.
No kidding. Thank you so much, Erin. You just were amazing. Oh my God, I was in tears.
Oh, God bless you. I mean, I just,
I saved mine for now.
What's that?
I saved mine for now, my tears.
Oh my gosh. Oh, God bless you. Really. It was like my joy. Like, I just want to keep working on it and then just do better and do more and give you more and, but.
Well, I think we got the full buffet.
I'm willing.
And you were delightful. You are engaging and funny, and
it was wonderful. Thank you.
It was wonderful. Great job. Great job.
Thank you guys. Love you.
Erin. With that hand.
Love you.
All right. So what time is it? Oh, Vesper started 3 minutes ago in my backyard. Gotta go.
Okay.
But I just can't push the end button.
I know. Well, if she runs out the door.
Let's do it. Let's do an after party together later.
Yes. Good idea.
Yeah.
We'll Zoom.
I hope